Hello all, welcome to Gelvin Valley. We are in the middle of harvesting canola with much bigger kit than we're used to. We're just opening up the field over here, field number 21, so let's keep on a-cracking. I have a truck in another field, but I think, woo! Yeah, see the outer edges of these fields, because I got so close to the fence, the header's interfering with things on the edge. Hey, quit sliding down the hill. What am I running into? Come on, get out of there. Yeah, I'm just a little worried that if I attempt to put it on higher, that it will be an exercise in futility. So I'll do it on manual the first. I almost think I harvested some of the things that were sitting in the. Is that possible? Some of the decorations Wes chose to use in the ditch here are actually withered. Is it withered barley? I almost wonder if I clipped some of that, but maybe I didn't. It almost feels a little strange harvesting in this field, knowing that we just recently planted this particular field. Let me just go just past the edge of the wash here. I'll just pause and back up and head on over across the stream. I just love that Wes has a few fields kind of like this, where you have kind of a stream in the middle of it or some other obstacle, if you will, to get in there. I know farming is different in places all over the world, but I know that kind of thing, and maybe that's kind of why I like this map so much. Some of this, just reminds me of home. I know I've mentioned it before, I worked on Lone Oak Farms when I was a teenager, and we had a lot of non-square fields, we had a lot of hilly fields, and we occasionally had some that were, the proverbial back 40, where you had to, it wasn't easy getting to the field, you had to cross over. One we had kind of down what we call the canyon. It was called the Brown 20. It was a 20-acre patch, and we had to go cross a river kind of down through a cattle pasture, on some dirt roads, if you will, just to try to access the field. Once you got to the field, it was a normal field, kind of like any other, although curvy and hilly in this case. But I just love it when a mapper has some obstacles in the map, kind of like this. We're kind of coming up through this weed patch. Every time I see those weeds now, I know the next time I work this piece, we are going to be taking care of said weeds. Oh, Jiminy. Is that just... Yeah, the ground is just pretty uneven. We haven't tried this particular field, with a shorter header or a smaller combine. So, with just a wider header, we're running into more difficulties. Come on. More difficulties interfering with the ground, that I wonder if the smaller, come on, I didn't mean to go back up all that distance. Does it do that to you guys too, where sometimes, come on, lift, you want to just back up just a tiny bit, and you do it just a little, and it ends up taking your machine back way farther than you wished for. Man, this is just brutal. Trying to... Come on. There we go. There is something in here that... Yeah, oh, here's kind of where it is. Yeah, I'm kind of right up on the side. Yeah, I should probably go into the editor, smooth that a tiny bit. Although I can hear Wes and just deal with it. That's how I made the map. That's why this field was a little cheaper. It just had more bumps. And these aren't huge fields, really. So, I imagine we'll fill up the tank over here, but still not large fields. So maybe ultimately we'll just see where all this goes. I may end up just back with my little teeny combine and enjoy watching the hillside grow. But for the moment, I don't mind using some red paint. Let me see if I can get this corner. Yeah, see, the littler machines have no problem turning around as such. Takes a little more effort when you're doing it with the bigger one. Okay. Maybe I'll get at this. I'll just back up here. And maybe now, can I hire this thing? Because I still have, let me see here, somewhere here, there we go. We're already done with this hillside piece. I think that was our first field down. We've harvested 22, working on 21. So I'm going to take this over to the field, which is right next door. It's kind of different in harvesting, having such a big trailer to... Oh, this is kind of uneven. Get through here. There we go. I'm just not used to having this large of machinery to work with in here. Get to the other side. Oh, it likes crawling up the hill. I'm not sure in real life if you would take a truck like this up the hill like we're doing. Probably wouldn't. Single axle truck with slick tires. Yeah, I don't know that this would be a smart thing to do. Or to go through a riverbed, kind of like that. You know, I thought I had something. Do I have... Okay, help menu. There we go. Trying to see how much canola. Okay, good. I remembered the setting that I had the last time. I'm trying to... Let's... No small feet for it to hold the hills here. Just to keep this moving. Yeah, it's going through the side of it. Now I'm kind of curious. Got it taken out. Kind of curious to see if in higher mode it'll be able to find the canola. I guess we'll find out. Here it just kind of... Alright, this is going to be a little experiment. I think it'll find it. It's definitely pointed in the right direction. Alright, yeah, I think it has it. I'm going to hop back to the combine since I'll need to take it across the way once it gets done with this little dab. But while I'm harvesting here, maybe something I could share is I got started on it like 2 episodes ago and made the mistake of trying to start a story right as I was trying to pick out equipment for the harvest. So that's kind of my own blooper. But we had, this past week, had some excitement kind of in the area here where a neighbor's cows got out. And I think I said at the time, he's kind of in back of us. He's maybe half a mile away, give or take. And it was in the morning. I live right next door to my parents. Yeah, I didn't move very far away from home, apparently. But my father, early in the morning as he was heading to work, and we worked together, he noticed there was a couple cattle that came through his property. A couple black Angus cattle, just coal black. And they headed over towards my place, and I was up at the time, but I was in the restroom, getting ready for the day, doing what we do. I never heard them, and the dogs, didn't have a conniption. I don't know why. But apparently, my dad saw it kind of walk right through, or saw them walk right through our property, and kind of keep on going to the north. And he didn't know whose cattle they were. We would figure that out later. And I never saw them. So he told me about them, when we got to work. And anyway, I just assumed, because to us, at least how I was raised, when your animals get out, that's a big deal. And you pretty much drop almost everything you're doing in order to go get your animals back in. Because they can cause a lot of damage, to people's property or whatever. So you want to be respectful and go collect them. And plus, they cause money. I mean, they and when they're out on the loose, you never know. They won't necessarily just come home. And I really don't know cow psychology. Maybe someone here would know the animal much better than I would. Pets, dogs, cats, those kinds of things will often have a homing instinct that even when they roam a field, they know where home is and will come back to it. And I really don't know if the same is true of cattle. Maybe it is of horses. They seem to have an instinct for that, but I really don't know, like I say, for cattle. So who knows if they would have gone back to the guy's place. Well, fast forward through the day, I get home, it's probably, I tend to work my typical day. I usually don't come home because I like avoiding traffic, so I don't leave at 5. A lot of times I schedule to try to be home around 6, so I'll leave the office. I live about 15 minutes away. So, dealing with more hill issue. So I got home around 6, left quarter till, get home and go in, change and everything. And I was reconnecting with the wife, and kind of over her shoulder, I was looking out the window while we were visiting and said, "Who's that?" Here I saw in the farm field, kind of next to our house, there was an elderly man with a walking stick, and he was just walking out on the grass. And then when I looked up the hill from him, he appeared to be herding 2 black Angus cattle. And then it clicked, I remember what my dad told me, and so all day long, these cattle were who knows where, and stomping on who knows what. And so the fella here, I think he had just gotten off work himself. He was out trying to herd them home. And I guess we live in the country. It's more suburban. There are farm fields here and whatnot. But there's a lot of homes, a lot of roads, and I really don't know what he was trying to do, the neighbor. He was pushing them up the hill, through a grass seed field right next to our house. And of course, this time, my dogs came out to say hey, and, were just barking to beat the band. So the cows, of course, didn't want to come near over here. We did take our dogs and we put them in their kennels so they wouldn't interfere. But I really don't know what he was intending to do, because he could, I live kind of on a residential street. It is paved, and it leads to, a 2-lane road, if you will. And I kind of think he was hoping or intending to herd his cattle onto the main highway. And, well, not really a main highway, but a 2-lane road, which has lots of blind spots for drivers, and that he was intending to herd his cattle up the road till he got to his place to get him back in his pasture. Well, anyway, it failed miserably, needless to say. And, his cattle, when they got up against some briar patches and a fence, they chose to balk. And it didn't help. We were over. I had just gotten home. My son came home shortly after me. And so he had a big, noisy truck that he came in on. And so we were milling around. We would have had maybe a small corral to put them in. Right by our home is a small barn, have a little corral set up. And a couple small pastures, if you will, but it may have been pretty hard to herd them in there. I don't know. Down below our place, there's maybe there's a hay pasture, or we're going to turn it into hay here in a month or so. That's probably, 12, 13 acres total, all enclosed with fence. Sometimes my father pastures his cows in there, usually after he's cut the hay off for the year. So, but for temporary or whatever. Anyway, I went in, got changed, put on different shoes, and this fella looked like he was alone, our neighbor. So went out to try to help. My son went out, my wife went out, my folks next door and some other neighbors came and tried to help, and basically tried to herd these 2 cattle into the hay pasture, the 13-acre piece or whatever. Had a couple gates. We just wanted to get them enclosed in fences or whatever. And, well, long story short, these cattle were not having it at all. Okay. Actually, I should probably hire this guy so that he can do this automatically. Here, I'll set that up. Let me go back to my truck. So, I mentioned the grass seed field. Well, right next to the grass seed field is a hazelnut orchard, a huge one. Well, at least it's huge to me. It's like 90 acres of hazelnuts, just lots and lots of trees. Well, the cattle balked. We were out there trying to herd them, and we used every trick we could think of, including bringing them food, lots of grain. Cattle love grain. It's trying to lure them in, and they wouldn't have any of it. And I gotta fill this up. It'll get close. This is maybe the 5th load. I think I hold 59,000. So, yeah, I maybe could put another partial load in here. It'll hold whatever's left in this particular field. So maybe let me head towards the entrance so I have it all ready to go. I'll head back to my combine. Oops. So at some point, like I say, the cattle balked. They went down into the hazelnut trees, and my son, he's in pretty good shape. He ran after him, and I know by the time we were all done with this, he was definitely huffing and puffing. Because they just, when there's no fences, you know, and they're fairly large animals, they're going to go wherever they want to go, and eventually, they got him chased out of the hazelnuts. Who knows what damage they did in there. They came on up and around, and one of them was a bit more spooky than the others, or more easily spooked. You can almost just tell, you know, an animal when it has a certain amount of wariness in them, to where, you know, they're just they don't trust humans, they don't trust whatever, and so they're just very skittish, and they don't want to go where you want them to go. Anyway, this one here decided to breach one of my father's fences, and this one happened to be a 3-strand barbed wire. Somehow it walked right through it and was able to get through it without tearing it down. So alright, so that one was caught. And then the other one, there was an open gate, and I think my son closed it behind that one. Then it also went through a fence, I think, just to be with the other one. But finally, they were in one of my father's pastures, just a little bit different one to the south. And we debated for a little while whether we would try to, you know, herd them out of the pasture. You know, we were able to cordon them off from my dad's cattle, but we finally just decided to let them rest for a while. And it turns out they've now been in there, I think, several days, just letting them cool off. They're now mixing and mingling kind of with the other cattle, and probably having a better cow experience than they would have had previously. But we just figured that it had been pushed enough for the day, and sometimes I think with animals you gotta know when to quit, because if you, well, what you run the risk of is that they're gonna breach another fence, they're gonna do damage to the fence, they may harm themselves or other people's property. You know, they're big animals, and you know, they can be, you can't communicate with them, so their reactions, you know, to things may be just unpredictable. And so at some point we just opted to leave them in there. The neighbor, I mean, he was a pretty nice guy. He was elderly. I say elderly, he maybe was knocking on the door of 70 years old, and trying to herd the cattle back in all by himself. You know, that's kind of, unless you have really tame cattle, that's kind of a fool's errand around here. But anyway, you know, he was grateful, you know, for the help or whatever, although he didn't really appreciate my mom coming out on, they got this four-wheeler, but basically, you know, he thought that was spooking his cattle. And truthfully, it probably was, although my response to that would be, you know, hey, this is your problem, and you've now made it our problem. So just be grateful for whatever help you get. So I think the following day, we were attending at the time, we would go down, and my father was going to be gone, but my son and I were going to help the guy get his cattle out, after they'd had a chance to calm down. But the following morning, my dad sent out a text to all of us and said, actually, they'll stay in here for a while till he was planning a roundup later for his own cattle, and probably that would be the time to sift out these other cattle after they've had plenty of time to calm down, eat some grass or whatever. So I then made a mistake. I didn't look carefully enough. Have you ever done this? When someone includes you on a group text, and so I look on there, and I'm on there, my dad's on there, my son is on there, and I think another one of my brothers who maybe was going to help. So I replied to my dad and said, okay, no problem. And I said, well, hopefully it gives the neighbor time to fix his fences, because I have a feeling, if we took them back now, they would just get out again. Well, then my dad sends me a private text a few moments later and said, by the way, the neighbor was included on the text exchange. So, but as I say, sometimes someone has to say the quiet part out loud, that maybe might be considered, well, I didn't say it rudely, it was, I don't know, kind of matter of fact maybe, because it's the truth. We heard later this was the third time these cattle have gotten out this week. So, well, if they keep getting out, you don't want to take them back to the same pen, especially now that they've learned how to get out. So, anyway, maybe our neighbor doesn't like me now, but, I think I'm okay with that. So, I don't know if anybody listening here, if you live in an area where cattle can get out, and if they have, it seems to happen, I would say, several times a year. And this is no knock on the neighbor. Some of this just happens. It comes with having livestock. I know it's happened a number of times, with my father. Even though he has really good fences, they really are, if the cattle knew how strong they were relative to the fences that we put them in, we would have to build them way, way stronger just to hold them in. It's a lot of those cows, they're so strong that if they wanted to, they could pretty much walk through most of the fences that we have. We do try to put a hot wire there, and that, they don't like getting shocked, so of course they respect it. But they seriously could, if they wanted to, walk right through it. Alright, let's see how much of this we can offload. Maybe I can get most of it. Oh! All but 600 lousy liters. Alright. I'm gonna take this puppy down the road and open sesame. But if you've had this happen, I think I'm gonna try my luck, see if I can take it all the way down there, even all nice and wide. But if you live in an area where animals get out frequently, has it been a problem? And what responsibility do you think, someone should take? Oh, man, I better turn the lights on, and maybe I can see. Yeah, very strong signs here on good old Gelvin Valley. They can stop even a combine. And I don't know this neighbor. I think someone said he was some kind of a doctor. Okay, so he probably has lots of money. Maybe he can afford having cattle on his place. And I haven't seen his fences. What I do know is apparently they got it out 3 times, so that tells me they're probably not very good fences. And I don't know, maybe he just has never had any background in making fences, or maybe he doesn't know how to do them properly. My father grew up on a farm, and I have many childhood memories of making fences, and it's not that hard. Just need to know how to do it. So, maybe he just hasn't done that before, doesn't know how to fix them to beef them up. A lot of times too, it's just flat out hard work. And I know my dad is one of those types of people where quality is more important to him a lot of times than quantity. And so he has, a lot of times when we put in fences, they were really good ones, and look at my hands. They have dug many a post hole. Maybe instead of pounding in some chintzy little stake, that would hold up some wires, we instead buried a wooden post. And I know he's fond of, he would use railroad ties for the anchor posts, kind of on the corners, just to have something super strong, stretch against or whatever. But anyway, that was some excitement that we had around here, and it kind of would make an interesting mod. I was thinking about this later from a farming stand perspective. In here, the cattle are so genteel and well behaved. They wouldn't think about, getting out of their pens. And I don't know, it kind of would be an interesting thought to see the cattle attempt to escape their habitat and go on a toot around the neighborhood. Maybe you could have something like where if you didn't feed your cattle and they were induced to get out of the pen. I remember back in the day, the old farming games on the computer, Sim Farm. I think if you didn't feed and water your cattle, they would literally break the fence down and escape. So, I don't know, probably easier said than done in a game such as this. Anywho, the alarm has sounded, or the bell. Thank you all for coming along for the ride. Hope you're enjoying Gelvin Valley. I know I still am. Y'all take care. I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.